how to improve our articulation skills. When it comes to articulation, I just want to address this problem here because I think a lot of the times people tend to make this error. People tend to think, no, my accent is terrible. My accent is hindering my communication skills. And a lot of the times it's not your accent that is causing miscommunication. A lot of the times it's your articulation, how you pronounce certain words. It's not your accent that's the problem. I really believe that accents are the most beautiful things when it comes to communication skills. Because if we all sounded the same, my goodness, that would be so boring. I love different accents. I really appreciate different accents, the different sounds. It tells so much. It tells so many rich stories behind it. I love the different melodies that exist within different accents. It's beautiful. Now, when it comes to articulation and pronunciation, what's important for you to realize is the way to practice is really simple. What you can do is grab a book, any book you like, and once you've got that book, you now need to read that book 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night, if this is the one skill you want to focus on for now. And 5 minutes a day is enough. Trust me, this is exhausting. When you read this, you have to overdo your mouth movements and overdo the tongue movements. Okay, so while I'm reading this is how it would look. Nothing makes sense by itself. If you want sense, you have to make it up. Sense you have to make up is nonsense. You have to make up nonsense to explain what you are doing. That's because you're insane. It's a very interesting passage from the book. Now, when you do this, you'll start to feel, for those of you who don't articulate your words a lot when you speak, and you don't have good articulation, that's okay. We all start somewhere. Then as you're doing this, you're going to feel your lips and your tongue and your mouth and your jaw. You'll be like, oh man, that's getting so sore. And if it does get sore, good. Good. Just like you going into the gym lifting weights, whereas this is much easier. This is just you moving your mouth. That's your muscles and your lips and your tongue. It's all kind of all these different muscles that live within your facial structure. It's all of them developing. And as they develop more, and as you do this exercise more, it dramatically increases your articulation, and it will improve your pronunciation, and it will help you sound more clear. It'll help you come across with more authority and more credibility. Most of my personal stories, Vinh, I can't remember all the details to make it cohesive. What can I do to build my life stories in an engaging way? Well, Anonymous, I really appreciate the question you asked. One of the main reasons why people don't storytell is simply because people don't remember stories. So many people forget the things that happen. We all do. We forget 80% of what happened yesterday. They've done tests on this, and even people who are involved in some kind of crime and you're a witness at the crime, when they go and they start to ask those people questions about what the person looks like, 80% of them get it wrong. 80% of them it's completely nonsense. So when you rely on your memory to remember things, especially stories and things that happen in your life, it gets you nowhere. This is why story documentation is so important. This is why there's a module in the Stage Academy. Inside the Stage Academy, what you're going to see is a section in storytelling called Library of Stories. And if you go to that particular section, you're going to see the technique on how to document stories. And the gist of it at a high level is, in my life, Anonymous, when something happens that emotionally moves me, right? When something really moves me and makes me feel emotional, it could be a positive emotion or a negative emotion. If I feel like, wow, that's going to be a very potent story to share one day, I immediately document it in that moment. And the documentation process takes 2 to 3 minutes at most. 2 to 3 minutes at most. But then all of a sudden now you've captured that story like you've captured your favorite Pokemon. And now all of a sudden you can take it out anytime you need it because all of the details are there. And I've got hundreds and thousands of stories simply because I document stories. When something emotionally moves me, I document it. For example, the most recent thing that I documented was I just got a property in the hills, and I was sitting there in the morning on the property, and I was able to listen to the birds. And when I heard these different birds, so many different birds sing in the morning, that really emotionally moved me. I was like, wow, for the longest time in my life, I haven't heard the sound of birds. And then it just made me think, was it because the birds weren't there, or was it because you never sat still to listen for the birds? And that thought really emotionally moved me, which is now a story that I can put aside and retell at a later time about the importance of being present. Because in reality, the birds were always there. I just didn't take time to sit down and listen out for the birds. So again, I believe that's a really powerful story. Guess what? That's going to go on social media at some point, and all of a sudden now I've got stories. And as you start to build this habit, you're going to have hundreds and thousands of stories. You're going to become an incredible storyteller. How do you bring so much excitement and enthusiasm when talking in high-stake conversations? When it comes to high-stake conversations, if we want to be able to be our best selves, and we want to be enthusiastic, we want to be able to portray excitement, passion, etc., we have to become more familiar with high-stake situations. For example, if you're unfamiliar with going to job interviews, well then unfortunately when you go to a job interview for the first time, you'll be really scared. You're going to be really nervous and you'll freak out. And that's normal because when anybody is unfamiliar with anything, they can't engage in peak performance. And it reminds me of this moment I had in New York City when I was there for about a week and I stayed at the same hotel. And I remember every morning I would see this gentleman and he clearly was a cleaner of some sort, but he had all this safety gear. And I went, what are you cleaning that requires so much safety gear? And I remember engaging with him in conversation. I said, hey, what do you do? And he told me I clean the windows of this hotel. And I was like, oh crap, all the way to the top? Dude, that must be so scary getting up to the 150th floor. Like you must be like freaking out every day. And I remember him looking at me really with a blank face going,
yeah, no, I've done this for 20 years. It's not scary at all.
And I could have went, how can you say it like that? Even talking to you right now, my hands are sweating. And the lesson that I learned there, and the reason why I share this is because he was really familiar with that high stakes situation of getting up to the 150th level, right? Whereas for me, the mere thought of it, I didn't even have to do it that day. The mere thought of it freaked me out because I was unfamiliar with it. So if you still want to be your most passionate self, your most authentic self, and your peak self in high stakes situations, what it means is you need to expose yourself to more high stakes situations so it becomes more familiar. And when you're more familiar, you'll feel more confident in that particular environment. And what I would say here is high stakes situations, you can find high stakes situations every day. You can create them as well. So for example, if you're not used to speaking to strangers, that would be a high stakes situation for you. Start talking to some strangers. Why not? If you're sitting at the food court and you're eating by yourself during lunch, then why not create a high stakes situation where you see somebody else sitting by themselves and they look a little bit bored? Why not ask them, hey, do you mind if I join you for lunch today? I'm trying to make some new friends. That's a high stakes situation. As you start to get out of your comfort zone and start to engage in more high stakes situations and it becomes more familiar to you, what gradually happens is you are now able to perform at a peak level in those situations that often would cause you to fail, would cause you to lose all of your enthusiasm, would cause you to lose all of your vibrance. And I can tell you this right now. One quick example from my end is that when I first started doing virtual presentations, I remember the biggest one I've done online is about, I think it was nearly 50,000+ people. And I did it for one of the major companies in the world where they had all of their team members join from all over the world. I was freaking out. And I realized that, oh, right, I need to learn how to go live on Instagram first, which now doesn't faze me anymore at all whatsoever. But I started to create all these opportunities for me to practice being in the moment, being live. And then that helped me learn how to get really good with those high pressure situations when I'm presenting live, right? It's live. Anything can go wrong. It allows me to get more comfortable with it because I'm now more familiar with the unfamiliar. Nell asks, how do you pause without feeling weird? I tend to quickly jump to responding without pausing. Now, if you haven't realized, even before I got to your question, do you notice how I pause before I answer any of the questions here? And now, when I pause before I answer the questions, were you thinking, Vinh doesn't know the answer to this. Vin's a dummy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's losing all credibility with me. No, you most likely weren't thinking that. You were more likely thinking, oh, wow, I really like that Vin's actually spending the time to think on my question. I like that he's not just immediately answering me with what's the first thing that comes to his mind. Oh, wow, I actually like that he's processing this and he's really absorbing it. It almost seems like he's taking this question really seriously. That's what happens when you pause. And because you're unfamiliar with pausing, to you right now it's weird. And remember, that weird feeling is not weird. It's just an unfamiliar feeling. When you see public speakers on the stage, when someone asks them a question, like I always notice this and it's so rude. So someone might just ask a question, hey Vin, I just want to ask you a question about communication skills, about the pause. they haven't even finished asking the question yet. I'm like, yeah, I know the question. So when you pause, a lot of the times people, and I used to do this all the time because of the same feeling, Nell. I used to get really nervous and I didn't like the pause. And as a result of not liking the pause, I would just I'll answer their questions before they even finish their sentence. And then what I've slowly learned from the pros that do this, the pros that do Q&A, the pros that answer questions, they always take 3 to 5 seconds after a question to really just think. And then when they respond, the information that they respond with, people value it more because people feel like, oh, wow, this person really thought through their response before they articulated it. And look, of course, I understand there are times where you need to give people the answer straight away. Like as if you're in a burning building and people are saying, where's the exit? Let me get out of here. And you're like, that's how you get murdered. I'm pretty sure they'll just push you into the fire. Please don't take 3 to 5 second pauses there. Just tell them where the exit is. But you use your own situational awareness. Often what you'll find is when people ask a question and you pause before you answer it, it kind of increases the perceived value of the response.